Hey guys, it's Rush. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. This video today, we will be covering the 8BITDO 64 Bluetooth controller. This pad is compatible with a number of devices. Its design is based on the Nintendo N64 controller, but with more modernized characteristics. The stock N64 pad is a little unusual. It has the D-pad in the usual place. It has a 6-button layout. Now, it's not a 6-button pad because it's a Fightpad. It's just the design they used when the console was out. The analog stick, there's only one, and it was positioned in the middle of the controller. And then it had one shoulder button on the left, one on the right, and it had a trigger on the back. So an unusual design, unusual layout, very different to what we're used to. So what 8BITDO have done is made a more modern version of this controller. They've moved the analog stick from the middle to the top. The D-pad is down the bottom, so this is more similar to an Xbox style controller. It's kept the 6-button layout. The A and B buttons are large, just like the N64. And then these additional buttons are quite small. You can see they're much smaller in size. There's a bigger gap as well between these two action buttons here and these four there. The shoulder buttons are standardized as well. So you've got your single L and R button, but you've got two buttons marked as Z. So Z would have been the trigger that you found on the center of the old N64 controller. So you've got that on either side as well. Flipping it over, there's no paddles on the rear. So out of the box, you get the controller, you get a manual, which I've already been through, hence it looking a bit rough, and you get a USB Type-C wire. So the Bluetooth, there's no dongle that comes with the controller. The Bluetooth is built into the device. Now this will work on a number of devices, as I mentioned. So it will work on PC, Switch Model 1 and 2, Android devices, version 9 and above. And it also works on the Analog 3D, which is a modernization of the N64 console. So this seems to be the default or go-to controller for that console. So it will not work with Xbox or PlayStation unless if you have an adapter. Connectivity, Bluetooth obviously, and it has the wide functionality. The weight of the controller, it's quite small in terms of size. If I compare it actually to, I've got the Xbox controller here. You can see the Xbox controller is ever so slightly bigger, but I can feel that when I pick up the 8BITDO that it feels a lot smaller. It just feels very compact, like the buttons are all very close together. But this weighs in at 226 grams, so for the size of it, it is quite heavy. I'd say the Xbox controller feels heavier, but for a controller this size, very, very heavy. The actual feel of it, it's typical 8BITDO. It's very like matte, but has a nice soft feel to it. I can't really explain it with 8BITDO controllers, but they do feel built very well. Plasticky, matte finish rather than gloss. But everything feels really nice. The buttons feel great. The shape, design, a lot of like curved edges to it. I love 8BITDO controllers. So the buttons I mentioned, membrane buttons, same as the shoulders, D-pad. So there's no switches here. This is my personal preference. I actually prefer membrane style buttons. And the analog stick has a octa gate, so you can feel when you go into each of those directional inputs, the up, down, left, right, and the diagonals. It feels good. So on the rear of the pad as well, there is a switch, a toggle. I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but it does have engraved on the pad a D and an S. The D will be used for if you want to connect it to PC, to the Analog 3D, and to your Android device. But the S on the left-hand side, that's used for the switch. You can also remap buttons. So if you hold two buttons together at the same time, like that, and then press the select button in the middle, that will cause the light to blink, and that will actually switch the inputs around. But what happens with this is when you disconnect the controller and reconnect, those settings are erased. So it's not a permanent switch. You can map the controller in a particular way, but it's not permanent. If you do want to remap the controller, the best way to do it, I've found, is through Steam, but obviously that's limited to PC gaming. So to remap the buttons in Steam, go to settings, then controller options, and then there is this test device inputs. Click on this, and then you have the ability to set up the device inputs. You can map whatever you want on the controller in regards to the Steam layout. So I'll quickly blast through this. And I'll set it up similar to how I have my fight pads. So it prompts you for the button you want to input. You just press the input on the controller. So here it's asking about L3. So I'm going to set that button to L3. We don't have a right analog stick, so I'll skip those steps. I'm going to set this button to R3. And the shoulder buttons, straightforward. Left side trigger, right side trigger. Interesting with the triggers. So this and this button here are both marked as Z, but they can be mapped independently through the Steam software. And that's it. All done, all set up, all configured. So on this channel, I mainly review and cover fight pads. So this is not a fight pad. I should caveat that. But this does have similarities to a fight pad. The main thing is the button layout. It has 6 buttons on the face. It has 4 shoulder buttons. And then it has obviously your directional inputs. For me personally, I'm a D-pad user. So I would prefer the D-pad to be up here. I like my D-pad to be nice and high. But on this controller, the analog stick's up there. So not an issue for the controller itself. It depends on your preferences. But that, for me, is one of the reasons why I would not use this pad. But I do like the 6 buttons. Again, it's not designed to be a fight pad, but it does share similarities. But the pad itself, as I mentioned, membrane buttons, they have a nice touch and feel to them. I prefer membrane buttons. The main reason why I prefer membrane is because I feel like the sound, the feedback of buttons that are not switches is much better. The thing with switches is when you press them down, sometimes you don't get a nice feedback. You press them by mistake. Even on release, you don't fully know when you've released the switch, whereas this, it's just on, off, clicky, on, off, very nice. Maybe not as quick as switches, but a much better feedback. They don't have much wobble either. There is a little bit of a wobble, but not too much of an issue. They feel really nice, the buttons. The D-pad is interesting. So it sits in a bit of a recess, if you can see that there. And the D-pad actually presses in. So when using the D-pad, you can sometimes not really feel where the D-pad is and where the controller is. You can feel it, but it sort of blends in, if that makes sense. But we'll talk about that in more detail during my testing in Street Fighter 6. The analog stick feels nice. It is a whole analog stick, I should mention that. But it's nice. Got enough friction on it so it sort of fixes back the center. Doesn't feel really wobbly. Clicky because of the octagate. And I like the response. It's quite stiff actually to press it down, but I like that feedback on pressing that down. So that feels nice. The shoulder buttons are a little softer and spongier, but they feel nice. Very 8BITDO-y, if that makes sense. Very standard 8BITDO shoulders. Nice sound and feedback to them. The triggers on the back, they are not adjustable. You can see they don't have much travel. I actually prefer this, but if you want a big trigger, like a long distance on the actual motion of the trigger, then you won't find that here. The pad itself, it's quite small. It's all compact. Everything's just sort of in the middle. It's quite small. It's got like a boxy shape, like a square shape, rather than an angled side to the edges. So my hands, I do have long hands, big hands. If I hold it normally, my thumbs are all in the middle, which is really weird. They're touching, which I don't think I've ever had that on any other controller. Maybe some of the other 8BITDO controllers. In terms of how it feels, my hand position, this is not great. But if you've got smaller hands and they're positioned more here, that's much better. So yeah, I have to sort of adjust my hands to sit outwards for them to sit in the middle of those 6 buttons and on the analog stick. I never use the D-pad, for fighting games at least anyway, if it's down here. I prefer the D-pad or my input method to be up here. So if my hands were naturally like here, that'd be much better. But again, with this controller, I'm not a fan of this D-pad, which I'll talk about more in a second. But this being a analog stick and that being up here, that for me is a bit of a deal breaker. But if you like analog sticks, if you like a 6-button layout and you've got smaller hands, this could be a really good pad for you, particularly for fighting games. So testing the control pad in Street Fighter 6, it's not a great experience for me personally. I'm not able to really execute very well. And that is because I'm using the D-pad. And as mentioned, the D-pad, what happens is when you're pressing it, it sinks inwards. And when it sinks in, I can't really feel exactly where my thumb is. I can feel where my thumb is, but it just feels really off. I can't really explain it. So trying to do super there, it's just very difficult to get the Dragon Punch into super because my thumb is just rolling across the actual body of the pad rather than being on the D-pad. The D-pad needs to be sort of higher up, I feel. Circular D-pad would have been much better in my opinion. But again, I'm critiquing this controller from a fighting game perspective. You could argue that I shouldn't be using the D-pad, I should be using the analog stick, and that's where this shines. Inputs are much better on the analog stick. Now, I'm not an analog stick user, so please don't judge me because I can barely use the analog stick, but that feels much better. I think if I preferred analog and I played fighting games, this analog stick with this 6-button layout is actually really nice. But obviously, remember, it's quite a small controller as well. So using the analog stick feels a lot better. I feel much more comfortable. Even though I don't use analog stick, this feels so much better. Let's see if I can get this on analog stick. This is really taking me out of my comfort zone. Okay, I didn't get the CA, the super out of the run DP, but it feels good. I'm really impressed with the analog stick. I actually like, if I was going to commit to switching, this would be a contender for me to consider. But I can already feel and pay attention to this. Look how I'm holding the controller. I'm actually not holding it very firmly. I'm sort of holding it in quite a loose position. If I'm going to hold it properly, that would be me holding it properly. And that just feels, I'm not even using the ball of my thumb here, the joint. I'm using like whatever this section of my thumb is, not even the joint. That's what's sitting on those lower buttons. I need to sort of let go of the pad a little to get down to these lower buttons. So I do need to position my hands further out to get an optimal position on the pad. But I like it. It feels really nice. It does feel typical 8BITDO. It feels nice, well built, solid, plasticky, but I like the matte finish. The buttons feel fantastic. I do like this analog stick. Really nice. Another thing about the D-pad that I didn't mention is when you're going from backwards and forwards. So I'm just tapping backwards and forwards now. But if I scan over backwards and forwards, I do that. So I'm not pressing up. You can see on the D-pad, I'm not pressing up. But see how Ken is jumping. So it does register jumps when you're going from left to right. And I noticed this a lot when I was doing my testing before doing the recording. You gotta be very careful. You almost have to press sort of more downwards when you're going from left to right, and that stops that problem. But when switching quickly, just across the middle, so I'm not pressing the up, it'll sometimes trigger a jump input. Another reason why this D-pad is not good for fighting games. So to conclude, a really nice controller, not a Fightpad as I mentioned about a million times in the video, but I like the build quality. 8BITDO always feel good in terms of their controllers. Love the buttons. Not a fan of this D-pad, but this analog stick is pretty good. I think if you are a Fightpad user, 6-button layout, analog stick user, this could be a good pad for you. As long as your hands aren't big, it has some potential. Obviously limitations because it's not PS5 compatible out of the box and Xbox compatible, but if you're a PC gamer, could be one to try out. I really like 8BITDO controllers. I think they build pads that are reasonable in price, good build quality. I did find on the M30 that the Saturn D-pad, after a bit of time, there was a bit of wobble, but that's a very common thing you find with the Saturn D-pad because it's quite big, has a lot of movements with it. So I do feel 8BITDO have the potential to build really good controllers, even possibly like the perfect Fightpad. I don't think that's really on their radar for a controller type to build, but really good, especially if you're looking to play retro games. This is a really good pick for you. If you don't mind analog, you've got these buttons, you've got the button layouts. You don't have to use 6 buttons. You can use your traditional 4 buttons here, 4 buttons at the top, but you have these additional action buttons on the face of the pad. I do like it. I really, really like it. Doesn't really serve any purpose for me because I only play fighting games, but as a general opinion of the pad, I do like it and I do recommend it. So that is it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Any questions, any queries, as always, give me a shout and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.